This is the Sports Bash Warm-Up with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN. Now, live inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, here's Josh Hennig.
Thursday edition of the warm-up. Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. Glad to be on board with all of you today. Text board is open as always, 609-403-0973. Coming up on today's show, we got to talk Sixers with Kevin McCormick, 97.3 ESPN Sixers writer for 97.3ESPN.com. Also, you can catch out his work on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. So we'll be getting into all the stuff from Simmons to Horford to Embiid to the NBA bubble and more coming up with Kevin at 125. Plus this hour, we got to get to, well, the moves the Eagles haven't made this week. The latest on the Dak Prescott front. What on earth is going on with the Washington football team? All that and more right here. 1 hour to do it. And I'm here for you. Josh Hennig, 97.3 ESPN. And right off the top, I want to get to something I've been seeing floating around online this week. And I think it's a topic that, you know, if the world was a little bit different right now, if things were quote unquote back to normal, that we would be having a little bit more conversation about. And because we only have social media, that's all we have to, you know, kind of figure this out. When the news was kind of circulating that there might be a move this week, right? There was the Brian Baldinger tweet from NFL Network's Brian Baldinger, you've heard on the Sports Bash with Mike Gill in the past here on 97.3 ESPN. Brian put out the tweet that said, big Eagles news coming this week. And I think a lot of people may or may not, and I'm not going to speak for anyone in particular, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on. The idea that maybe people were disappointed by the signing of Jason Peters. Because I've been seeing on different social media platforms, people were hoping it was the signing of Jadeveon Clowney or trading for Yannick Ngakoue. You know, people were hoping for the splashy move. And one of the problems when it comes to football is that everybody wants the splashy move. Everybody wants the big time signing, the big names. But nobody wants the side effects or repercussions of it. Just down the road from Philadelphia, you have a team in Washington run by just a mess of an owner in Daniel Snyder. Think about all the big-name free agents Washington has brought in over the years. The big-name coaches. All of these things they've done. The money they've spent. The trades they've made. You know, I remember over 20 years ago was them signing the big D tackle Wilkinson. Look how that went for them. Of course, they signed another D tackle about 10 years later, Albert Haynesworth, with big money. That didn't work out too well either. They traded up to get Robert Griffin III in the draft. They went out and brought in a big-name head coach like Mike Shanahan. At one point, they brought back Joe Gibbs. They brought in Steve Spurrier. The Redskins, as they were formerly known, now that they've retired the name, are a team that literally went out of its way for the last 20-plus years to do the splashy big move. Well, the Eagles haven't always done the splashy big move. And people act like that's a bad thing. But yet nobody wants the repercussions or the side effects that comes along with getting a big star. You know, everybody in theory wants Odell Beckham Jr. on their team, but nobody wants to deal with Odell Beckham Jr.'s stuff, shall I call it. Everybody wants Jalen Ramsey, but nobody wants to deal with the contract issues that may have come along with that. So when we talk about players like Clowney and Ngakoue, two of the biggest players available on the market, but getting them is a big big problem. Because as been reported by multiple people, whether it's Adam Kaplan from Inside the Birds, NFL Insider, will be on the Sports Bash Football at 4 today, whether it's anybody else around the league, they have all reported that Clowney wants a lot of money, and he wouldn't get signed until he brings down his number. Well, that's been an issue now for 4 months. You look at a guy like Ngakoue. Ngakoue wants to get out of Jacksonville. He would love to be traded to a contender, but what's the problem with Ngakoue? Ngakoue is a guy that, for all intents and purposes, is stuck with Jacksonville because they can't get the deal that they want done in compensation for him. An organization like the Jaguars has a huge asking price for Ngakoue, and so far, they haven't gotten their asking price. So while Ngakoue wants to leave and Ngakoue wants to go somewhere, a team like Philadelphia may not be willing to pay the high ransom that Jacksonville is asking for. And by the way, remember, Jacksonville, before they traded Ramsey, wanted a huge number from teams in the first place, and that was a big reason why the Eagles didn't get Ramsey previously. So there's hindrances for the Eagles getting these big names. But even if they get those big names, is it really worth it? Now, Yannick Ngakoue is one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. No one's denying that. But the problem with Ngakoue is if you give up all the assets that the Jackson Jaguars want for Ngakoue, what is your team like moving forward? You gave up a ton of assets, probably overpaid basically, to bring in a player who's going to be 25 years old. And while Ngakoue has been a force of nature as a pass rusher, you still got to re-sign him as well. So is the combination of draft picks you have to give up and then giving him the contract worth it? And then with Clowney, even if you give him a 1-year deal, is he going to really want that? Is he going to be okay with that? Is what the Eagles are willing to offer on the table? See, the Philadelphia Eagles have a lot of money committed in the next couple of years. This is something that we have discussed before. You look at the money right now that is set to be paid to guys like Fletcher Cox, Carson Wentz, Lane Johnson, Zach Ertz, Brandon Brooks, Jason Kelsey, Brandon Graham. Don't forget about Malik Jackson. Didn't get to play last year. You just brought in Darius Slay. You have a lot of money on the table to a lot of these players. You just signed Javon Hargrave. You shored up your inside tackle position. Well, if you take all the players I just mentioned, Fletcher Cox, Carson Wentz, Lane Johnson, just those three guys, you're talking about $72 million of money you have committed. You get it, throw in Zach Ertz up to $84 million. You throw in Brandon Brooks, you're up to $98 million. Throw in Jason Kelsey, you're only at a nice, cool $106 million. You have a cap number for next year. And, of course, you got Brandon Graham. He's got his number, too. So now you're around $120 million for next year. Now, I'm sure that Howie Roseman can find ways like he always has to get those numbers down and make those numbers work. But are you really going to sacrifice what you already have to bring in a big name, to make the big splash? And that's where I think there's a disconnect, because when a tweet like came out saying that, the Eagles are going to go out and make a big move, but is a big move what this team really needs? First of all, what this team needs is to stay healthy. Second of all, they got to take care of what they already have in-house. This team has a lot of questions with the players they have coming back from injury. I mean, we don't even know if we'll see Alshon Jeffrey this year. We're assuming we will, but he injured himself at the end of last year. So his clock is going to have him miss at least probably the first 8 weeks of the season. He's probably going to be one of the guys they put on the injury list with designation to return. So when you think about the Philadelphia Eagles, you realize that this is a team that has a lot of money tied up in a lot of players. And as a result, going out and getting a Yannick Ngakoue or going out and getting a Jadeveon Clowney may not be the best option for this team. And I know it's not something you want to hear, and I know for the handful of you who think you got it all figured out because you play Madden and you have it figured out through your Madden game setup, that you know that what's going to happen is going to happen. But I'm telling you, it's not that simple. And let's be realistic. If the Jaguars don't want to trade Ngakoue to the Eagles, that's their prerogative. Remember, the Eagles called about Jalen Ramsey previously, and they couldn't get him from the Jags either. So don't be angry or mad or exasperated with the Eagles just because they didn't get the big star that you wanted. The Philadelphia Eagles are trying to build a team long-term to be successful. They're not trying to make a splash of headlines just to satisfy a certain number of the fan base that wants, the big, name in the lights player. Because as we've seen from the Washington football team, the big name in the lights player doesn't always work out for you. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. Speaking of that Washington football team, so they're already dealing with this situation with the changing of the name, and there's a guy out there who basically went out and trademark patented a bunch of the names that they may want to use. Well, now they got a whole other set of issues going on. So the Washington Post teased this week about a big story coming out that has to do with the culture of the organization. Well, the news came out today that Daniel Snyder, the owner of the Washington football team, has hired D.C. attorney Beth Wilkinson to review the organization's protocols per league sources. Wilkinson is expected to conduct a deep dive into the organization's past culture. Team officials are highly upset and frustrated about current speculation. Now, team officials can be all upset all they want, but the speculation has a lot of roots. Front office members Richard Mann and Alex Santos have both resigned, as well as longtime radio play-by-play voice Larry Michael. They've all left the organization. Also, it was just a year and a half ago that the bizarro story came out about how basically they were handling their cheerleaders as, for lack of a better term, illegal escorts to placate advertisers. They were having the cheerleaders basically fraternize with people from different sponsorship groups. This was a story that came out about a year and a half ago that the cheerleaders were asked to do things that were obviously not in their job description. They were asked to do things and be involved in things that was outside of what is asked of them, shall I call it, for their jobs. And this was an issue up and down the organization where there were several people outside of just the cheerleaders who were asked to do jobs that were not in their job description, that were borderline illegal or at least unethical in nature. And the way certain people were treated in the organization was completely unprofessional at times. So there's a culture issue in Washington, and an organization that had a very, very proud history. I mean, this was an organization that before Daniel Snyder came along was winning championships. During the 80s and 90s, the Redskins were one of the top teams in the NFL year in and year out. You knew with Joe Gibbs walking on those sidelines that those teams were always ready to go out there and win. But since the mid-90s to today, the team every once in a while catches, a little lightning in a bottle for a season or two, but overall they haven't been able to sustain any success. And now we're finding out that people are quitting on the organization. They're bringing in a lawyer, a high-powered D.C. attorney to review organization protocols. Listen, their new name may be the least of their problems right now. Daniel Snyder needs to get his head out of the sand. This guy has been operating in D.C. without any oversight, without any repercussions for how he's run his organization for a long time now. And whether he was directly responsible for some of the issues or not down in Washington, you and I both know that when it comes to anything that goes wrong in an organization, it's a top-down issue. The top of the pyramid, the top of an organization sets the standard for everything that happens below them. So if Daniel Snyder is not handling his business well, then that sets a standard for the people under him. And then the management under him sets a standard for the middle management under them, and so on and so forth. And with all the turnover they've had down there in D.C., with all the people coming in, people coming out in terms of players, coaches, front office, you really have to wonder, is the issues with this team that the Washington Post is preparing to come out with this long essay about, you have to wonder with this organization, is there a problem when it comes to the culture? And maybe the name of the team is going to be the less important issue moving forward. Listen, we all want the name to be picked because we want to know what to call them, right? You know, an organization that from the time they were in Boston before they moved to Washington, D.C. decades ago, they were known by one name for about 80 years. Well, the name change may be the least of their problems. I'm telling you right now, an organization with this many skeletons in the closet, the light's going to get shown on them, and people may be really disgusted with what's come out. Let's put it that way. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. We'll be talking Sixers and NBA coming up with 97.3 ESPN.com. Sixers writer Kevin McCormick coming up in about 9 minutes from now. I also want to touch on this Dak Prescott stuff because obviously the deadline came and went, and we all knew what was going to happen. What was going to happen was Dak Prescott and the Cowboys couldn't come to an agreement. Well, after the deadline passed, after everything that happened, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, was this story that came out of left field saying that, well, you know, Dak and the Cowboys were trying to get a deal done last minute, but, you know, they just couldn't figure it out. They ran out of time. Let me tell you, I think this is the most bogus story out there. This idea that they were trying to get a deal done. And listen, it's not that the NFL Network is not reputable. You know, the report is legit. But the information is not. The report is that the Cowboys were working on a deal that would have been $110 million guaranteed, $33 to $35 million per year. That was the report. But they ran out of time. They couldn't get it done before the deadline. That's such a load of baloney. You're telling me that you just happened to run out of time and you couldn't get a deal done. That actually sounds more like you're trying to save face after the deadline passed, that you're putting out this information. Let's be realistic. If Dak was looking for a specific number and the Cowboys were willing to offer him that number, this deal would have been done weeks or maybe even months ago. And then we can just, pour some gasoline on the fire when Dak Prescott's brother comes out and says, there's a reason I was never a Cowboys fan growing up. His brother Tad Prescott goes on the tweet, who knows how much longer I'll be cheering for them. I mean, talk about just taking a huge can of gasoline and pouring it on flames. And by the way, Tad Prescott followed up on that tweet saying, wow, some of y'all are big mad. Talk about the people who are coming at him on Twitter because they didn't like what he said. I told you this yesterday on 97.3 ESPN. Kirk Cousins, he played under 2 tags and he was out of Washington. I would not be surprised if the same thing happens with Dak Prescott. For whatever reason, the Cowboys look at this guy and they cannot get on the same page. Whether it's because he was not a first-round pick, whether it's because his negotiating agent is maybe not acting in his client's best interest. I don't know all the details, okay? But what I do know is if Jared Goff got a deal done, if Jimmy Garoppolo got a deal done, if Carson Wentz has gotten a deal done, all these young quarterbacks who are not Pat Mahomes have been finding ways to get deals done. But Dak Prescott and the Cowboys can't. Don't tell me that, oh, we were so close. We were right at the deadline and we ran out of time. Stop. You're full of it. Because if you really were serious about getting a deal done, it would have been done already. It's not a coincidence that the Cowboys have taken care of Ezekiel Elliott. They've taken care of Zach Martin, the guard, the all-pro guard. They've taken care of Amari Cooper. They took care of all the pieces around Dak before taking care of Dak. It's not a coincidence. This team has told you on numerous occasions that they need to invest in the entire team. They have spent a lot of draft capital in the offensive line and the defensive line. They've put a lot of money into their linebackers. They've put a lot of money into their receivers. They gave Ezekiel Elliott that huge contract. At some point, the Cowboys' actions are speaking louder than their words. And today, as of July 16th, I'm not sure if the Cowboys will ever give Dak Prescott the respect that he's expecting from them in terms of a salary. 609-403-0973. Get a text in here before we hit the break. Reminder coming up, Kevin McCormick, 97.3 ESPN.com Sixers writer. We'll get into Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, Sixers, NBA bubble, and more right here on the warm-up on 97.3 ESPN. 609-403-0973. Dan from EHC says the Eagles are about depth. They have had injuries more than any other team. But what is it? Peters signing, drafting Hurts are examples of a well-run organization outside of the injuries. The Eagles are and always will be a well-run organization. That's from Dan and EHT. Well, I don't know if it always will be. I mean, listen, one day Howie Roseman might not be here, and who knows what's going to happen. I'm telling you, about 15, 20 years when Howie Roseman is no longer the GM and things might not be as, hunky-dory in Philadelphia, you might be wishing for the good old days. But to address your point, the Eagles are an organization that does value depth. And they've had a lot of injuries, and they need that depth, and they need to spend their money wisely. And it's not a smart idea to throw away a bunch of draft pick assets and a bunch of money on getting a Yannick Ngakoue or getting a Jadeveon Clowney just to steal the headlines. I'm more worried about how this team is going to manage their money long term. And frankly, as far as I'm concerned, take care of the people in your own house before you go looking on the outside. So many times in life, people want what they don't have. Oh, the neighbor has that car. Oh, the neighbor has that pool. Oh, somebody else has something that I don't have. Can't we just be grateful the Eagles have one of the three best tight ends in the NFL, a top-tier young quarterback, arguably the best right tackle in the NFL, the second best D tackle in the NFL? It's like none of that's good enough sometimes. It's like, oh, we got to have something else. Well, so-and-so got that toy for Christmas. Come on. There's a bigger thing going on here than just the Eagles didn't get the guy that I want. There are other issues that go into that as well. Don't be too short-sighted. Josh Hennig here, 97.3 ESPN, the warm-up. Text board open, 609-403-0973. Get to more of your texts in just a bit. Want to remind you, this week's Seize the Deal opportunity starts tomorrow, 9 a.m. Dickey's Barbecue Pit in Egg Harbor Township. You can get a $50 gift card for just half the price. That's right, Dickey's Barbecue Pit in Egg Harbor Township. The deal goes live tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. SeizeTheDeal.com. I think this deal is going to sell very, very quickly because this food is awesome. And think about all the damage you can do with a $50 gift card. Hey, listen, if you're someone like me and you're just not feeding a lot of people, maybe you want to make a dent and have food in the fridge for a few extra days and not to cook. Or if you're trying to set up a big party or you got a big family, guess what? Dickey's Barbecue Pit, $50 gift card for half the price. I mean, you can't beat it. That's a great deal. And you can seize this deal starting tomorrow at 9 a.m. For more information, tap on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Coming up next, we'll talk Sixers. with Kevin McCormick right here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Josh Hennig back here in the warm-up, 97.3 ESPN. Text board is open. We'll get to them just a little bit later this hour, 609-403-0973. But as promised, we'll get into Sixers, Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, Al Horford, the NBA bubble, all that and more right now. Kevin McCormick writes about the Sixers for 97.3 ESPN.com. You can follow him on Twitter at KevinMC973. As all guests, he joins us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Kevin, how you doing today?
Doing good, Josh. How you doing?
Pretty good. So, obviously, you've been putting up a lot of content about the Sixers, and you're doing a great job. I wanted to touch on some of the things you've been writing about, but I think the biggest thing on everyone's mind right off the top has to be this whole Ben Simmons moving positions, and some people like it, some people don't. Right off the top, from you, I want to know, how much do you like it versus dislike it? Because I think a lot of people, they're extreme one way or the other on this.
I would say I'm extremely for it, just in the sheer fact of we get to see him in a new role, and we get to see the Sixers, kind of capitalize on the versatility of a guy with his skill. I mean, not many guys have come to the NBA with his size, his speed, and his ability to create for others. I mean, to throw him into a new role, to add more shooting around him and kind of give him things to tinker with and try and add a new level to his game, I think it's going to be very fun to see, and I think we see him kind of take the next step in his game.
Now, you mentioned take the next step in his game. I think a lot of people will look at, for example, the videos about him shooting and say that is part of the next step. But isn't also part of the next step in his game just being more consistent as a basketball player too, though?
Yeah, I think in terms of we see him take a step as a scorer, just because, we'll see now either in a half-court set or even, times in transition where we'll see him, grab a rebound, take it coast to coast, and get to the rim. I mean, hopefully we see him in this new role be more aggressive as a scorer, but also still try to be the playmaker that he is.
I've always said that when it comes to the Sixers, I never understood why you had to have only one ball handler on the floor. And I understand the idea was, well, Josh Richardson can be a ball handler, and so can Tobias. But I think the bigger deal is the fact that if you can take pressure off of Simmons with Shake Milton, a guy who is obviously his main primary position has always been a ball handling guard, that in and of itself gives the Sixers options that they just didn't have before.
Absolutely, yeah. It's going to be big in a tempo sense and also in a half-court sense, because now when you not only you're adding another ball handler, but adding another shooter now. So now we can see Ben move off the ball. They've talked about a lot using him in pick-and-roll situations as the roll man. So we'll see him in more off-ball situations, but also you could see him maybe be a facilitator in the low post. I mean, you have a lot of guys out there in Josh Richardson, Shake Milton, Tobias Harris, even Joel Embiid himself, who can stretch the floor a little bit. So it's going to be interesting to see this new spacing-wise and this new look of Ben Simmons doing new things as a scorer, but also seeing him in different spots as a playmaker and seeing what he can do.
Also, and I'm not trying to conjure any bad thoughts for people, but I was also thinking about this morning. One of the things that gets overlooked about the Milton-Simmons pairing is the fact that we've talked about in the past here on 97.3, that is, what was the whole point of drafting Markelle Fultz if it wasn't to have another ball handler on the court? So in many ways, isn't Shake Milton fulfilling the original vision for the player they wanted to play along with Ben Simmons?
Oh, absolutely. He fills that role of a combo guard who can play make, can also go out and get a bucket for himself. I mean, we saw Shake when the team was riddled with injuries. He stepped up as a scorer. He also showed he could play make, he can shoot. Basically everything that they were looking for in Markelle Fultz, the Sixers will get in Shake Milton. Obviously not to the degree that we thought we were going to get with Fultz when he was first drafted, but in terms of play style and what they're looking for in pairing with Ben Simmons, I would say, yeah, he fits that type of or mold of player that they were looking for.
Kevin McCormick joining me here on the Boardwalk on the hotline on 97.3 ESPN. You got all of his Sixers and NBA coverage over at 97.3 ESPN.com. And Kevin, one of the articles you have up over there is about Al Horford. And to me, whether it's fair or not, I think Al Horford has been one of the disappointments for the Sixers season. but talk about how his new role could actually maybe amplify what he can bring to this team when the team returns to action.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, we saw all year the fit was not perfect, but I mean, this new role, I think, be, kind of a new chapter for him in terms of his tenure in Philadelphia, just because, he'll be playing a lot more at center. He'll also be defending other centers, but they'll also get to use him, kind of how Boston used him as, a pick and pop kind of guy. He can stretch a little bit, but still be able to do his work in the post for the second unit. And it'll be good because we've seen in the past bench scoring has been an issue for the Sixers. So having a guy like Horford come off the bench now, whether it be in playoffs or in these seeding games, if the bench, they need a bucket, you have a veteran out there like Al Horford who you can just throw it down to him in the post. He can go get a quick bucket, or he can also facilitate. He's a great passer for a big man, and now that second unit, with Glenn Robinson, Ferk and Korkmaz, you're going to have spot-up shooters in that lineup as well, so you're going to need somebody to get the ball to him. I think Horford will be able to do that.
Is it maybe fair or not fair to say that even after this year, the Sixers need to reevaluate Al Horford's long-term future with this team?
I would say it's fair. Even if he plays well, I would say, you still can go back to the drawing board and look at the year as a whole. But I think if he steps into this new role and plays well, I think it'll be a favor for him to keep him as opposed to, kind of pushing the agenda of getting rid of him. But I would say it is definitely fair to say that no matter how well he does in the bubble, to say that, he still might need to be moved in the offseason.
How much of it then is on Horford versus how the Sixers use him? Because, there's always that contention about, well, is Brett Brown using the right rotations? But I also got to ask you, Kevin, as someone who's watching the team and covering the team, do you feel like that Horford is always putting his best foot forward?
I would say he's trying to. Obviously, there's been some situations where he's just kind of doing what he has to do for the team. I mean, if you look at his three-point numbers, the amount of three-pointers he shot in this shortened season was some of his highest in his career ever. So obviously he was out there just doing what he has to do. And I would say his game and his numbers a little bit, but I mean, who knows? He also said that, he's been dealing with some nagging injuries. So it's off. Maybe we see a new, refreshed Al Horford, and now this new role we see Al Horford doing Al Horford things instead of being in that clunky lineup and being put in situations where he just kind of, has to do things that aren't really his strong suit to benefit that lineup.
Speaking of the lineup, the rotations, I know Brett Brown has had a lot of conversation with the media about different things he wants to do, but what do you think is the best way to handle this rotation? Because I know that a lot of people assume what the starters are going to be, but what kind of play do you expect to see from the bench, and what would you do if you were Brett?
I think a lot of the bench rotation is going to come down to which of your shooters are going to get hot, and in that situation, those guys will carry the load most likely. You have Alex and Al Horford, who are your locks, who are going to come off the bench just because you're going to need that ball handling, and you're going to need Al Horford's size. But the Sixers have a lot of wings on that bench that they can go to, which is a benefit for them. You have Matisse Thybulle, you have Glenn Robinson III, you have Ferk and Korkmaz. So you have this batch of 3D guys who can come in and be kind of floor spacers and consistent shooters. But it's really all going to come down to who's hitting the shots. I mean, have options now. So say, Ferk and Korkmaz gets hot in these 8 seeding games. Maybe he sees more of the load off the bench than if Matisse Thybulle or Glenn Robinson, or maybe it's vice versa. I mean, we saw Matisse get hot early in the regular season, so if he comes back to that, to have his strong shooting and that defense, maybe we see a good amount of Matisse Thybulle in the playoffs. I think Brett has options in these 8 seeding games. We might see a little quiet tournament to see who gets to play.
Kevin McCormick joining me here on the Boardwalk on the hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Go to 97.3ESPN.com or the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Check out his Sixers coverage up there on the website and on the app. Kevin, let's go a little big picture here. How do the Sixers match up with the Eastern Conference best teams? It's a question that everyone has a perspective on. And I think I've asked pretty much anyone who covers the NBA of the Sixers here on 97.3. So I want you to know your perspective. How do the Sixers match up with teams like the Bucks, the Celtics, and the Raptors?
I think with this new lineup structure, they match up a lot better than they did with the original starting lineup. Because if you're looking at a team like Boston, who right now they're projected to face in the first round, they're a very small lineup. Their lineup is all wings. So now when you have this new, smaller, quicker Sixers lineup, top to bottom, I think the Sixers now arguably have a better roster than the Celtics and might be favored in that series, as opposed to with Al Horford, they might have seen some troubles on defense because he would have had to chase wing players around. But I still, in the beginning of the year, they were looked at as a favorite, and I think they should be looked at now. I think that sleeper team has been a good fit for them just because of how the regular season went. But in terms of the pieces and depth, I think the Sixers are up there with any team at the top of the Eastern Conference right now.
It was interesting you mentioned about Boston, how they match up, because I think a lot of people, one of the reasons why they think well of Boston, whether it's a fair or unfair point, is everybody loves Brad Stevens, right? Everyone's like, oh, Brad Stevens is so smart. But, the Sixers have beaten the Celtics multiple times this year. And since the series when they lost in the playoffs, Brett Brown has gotten the better of Brad more often than not. So how much is the perception of the Celtics just incorrect at this point?
I could say the narrative's definitely changed in that matchup just because, the Sixers have gotten better as a whole as well, and they have that one key factor in the matchup, and that's Joel Embiid. In the past, the main thing was Al Horford was the Embiid stopper, and that was kind of the kicker of the Celtics always having the edge on the Sixers. But now with Al Horford on the Sixers, the Celtics have no answer for Joel Embiid. So when they match up in the playoffs this time around and the game gets a lot slower and we see a lot of post play from Embiid, I think the matchup continues to go the same way it did in the regular season.
Are you concerned at all about a Sixers series with the Miami Heat?
Not entirely. I think in terms of maybe outside of the Bucks, the Heat arguably have the most size and the most bodies to throw at Joel Embiid. But if you look at that Heat team, it's a lot of young guys and a lot of inexperience. Yeah, they went and traded for Andre Iguodala and Jay Crowder, but those guys are on their last legs. And if you're looking at this Sixers team compared to that Miami team, I would still say the Sixers not only have some better pieces, but also have more experience, which is key come playoffs.
I noticed you didn't mention Jimmy Butler there, so you're not worried at all about Butler getting in the Sixers' heads there?
There will be that dynamic, but we've seen the perimeter defender that Ben Simmons became this year, and he told the media during this week that he's gotten stronger and he feels better. So in terms of when they step out there, I think, that rivalry will still be there, and I think Ben will take the initiative of trying to shut down Jimmy. So I'm not too worried about Jimmy Butler in the playoff series.
If you're being objective, what percentage would you give the Sixers of making it to the NBA Finals in this NBA bubble?
Making it to the finals, I would say probably in that maybe 10 to 20% range, just because we still don't know what they're going to look like. So they could find lightning in a bottle, or it could just sputter out and it be a failed experiment. So you can't really say they're a lock to go far, but if this does work well in the way that they expect, I think we should see a serious playoff run from the Sixers.
Well, you've just proven that you're more objective than the majority of Twitter, so congratulations, Kevin.
Thank you.
He's Kevin McCormick. You could check out his work covering the 76ers at 973ESPN.com. And as all guests, he joined us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Check out his Twitter at KevinMCC973. Kevin, appreciate the time. I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Oh, thanks, Josh.
Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get to your text coming up next, 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation right here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. Josh Hennig back here on the warm-up, 97.3 ESPN. Leading up to the Sports Bash, Mike Gill, Hunter Brody in the house. We got Phillies talk coming up with Bob Wankel from Crossing Broad at 2:30. Sixers talk with Darryl Reynolds coming up at 3, and football at 4. Adam Kaplan, Inside the Birds podcast coming up at 4 o'clock. Football at 4. Busy Sports Bash coming up here on 97.3 ESPN. Want to remind you, before we get to the text board at 609-403-0973 to get your thoughts on everything that's going on today. Seize the deal. This deal goes live tomorrow, 9 a.m. at seizethedeal.com. Dickey's Barbecue Pit in Egg Harbor Township, $50 gift card for $25. What if you're a guy like Broads over here who is, you got a fiance, you got a new house. Maybe you don't want to cook. Maybe you want to just be like, can I just get some food and stock up the fridge for a couple days so I don't have to do any extra cooking work? Well, listen, you could do a lot of damage with a $50 gift card from Dickey's Barbecue Pit in EHT, and you can get it for half the price. So maybe you're like Broads, you want to stock up the fridge for the weekend. Maybe you want to have a good time on Saturday night without having to think about the food the next day. You have all that food sitting in your fridge. Get in on this deal starting tomorrow, 9 a.m. This deal will sell quickly. Dickey's Barbecue Pit, Egg Harbor Township, $50 gift card for $25. Make sure you tap on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. I know I'm certainly looking forward to this deal. I'm telling you, Dickey's Barbecue Pit is a place that, your money's going to go a long way with some of that food. They put a lot of different things, a lot of different options. What was that hinky term? Optionality, right? You get some optionality with the Dickey's Barbecue Pit in Egg Harbor Township, that's for sure. 609-403-0973 is the text board. So we opened the show talking about Eagles. They didn't get the big names, but they're still building a winner every year. The Washington football team, they're in the midst of a potential scandal, looks like. I mean, you would hire an attorney, a big-powered attorney like Wilkinson, if you're not worried about some issues coming out. Then the Cowboys. I mean, this situation with Dak Prescott is just turning in fuego right now. And that's where Mike from the Villas chimes in about the Cowboys. He says, I love seeing turmoil in Dallas. Mike from Villas, that's the thing. The Cowboys haven't had a ton of turmoil because, for the most part, they've actually done a good job at trying to do things the right way for the most part in the last decade. Obviously, they have a little thing here and there, like, drafting Randy Gregory when they probably shouldn't have, or keeping Jason Garrett for too long, or maybe like how they went around their head coaching search where they really only interviewed two guys, it seemed like, and that was it. So, I mean, there are some little things here and there, but this is definitely the biggest flamethrower on the situation that we've had the whole time in the last decade. Because, listen, aside from Jerry Jones opening his mouth too much, let's be realistic. The situation with Dak does make you ask questions. And as Max Kellerman said on First Take the other day, part of the issue with the Dak situation may be because he's not Wentz.
Carson Wentz is flawed, but Carson Wentz can make plays that only a handful of guys can make. 3 or 4 guys, obviously Mahomes is one of them, and Wentz is in that group right next to Mahomes. He can't do it as consistently as Mahomes. He can thread the needle like that and everything, but Wentz can do things physically that Dak can't do.
You really got to wonder, is there a part of the Cowboys that look at Dak and say his ceiling might just not be that high? Are there people in the Cowboys organization, whether it's people in the front office or maybe Mike McCarthy or Kellen Moore, is there somebody in Jerry and Stephen Jones' ear saying, maybe this guy only has a certain level to reach, and once he gets that level, it's a hard ceiling? We all know what Wentz can do in Philadelphia. The question with him has always been his health and consistency. But for Dak, there's a reason why he was drafted where he was. And it's not because he's not talented. It's because he was coming from an offense in college that really didn't ask him to do what other quarterbacks get the chance to do in college. Was he a great leader at Mississippi State? Yeah. Did he win games at Mississippi State? Sure. Did he show you the skill set to be an NFL quarterback? Of course he did. But he didn't have the football IQ coming into the league. There were questions about his accuracy. There's still questions about, can he consistently make certain throws? Sometimes when he scrambles out of the pocket, he doesn't set his feet before throwing the ball. There are small things with his game that make you scratch your head at times. But for the Cowboys to blatantly just not be able to get a deal done with him and then use the excuse, we ran out of time. We were so close. We thought we were going to get this deal done. They're just trying to save face. They're literally just trying to make you think that everything's A-okay. You know, it's like one of those WWE skits, right? Where the pro wrestlers and the manager are having an issue and the manager keeps saying, everything's fine. It's all okay. Why are you questioning it? I feel like the Cowboys are turning into a WWE skit with Dak. You ever see the emoji of the dog drinking coffee at the table with the building on fire saying everything's okay? That's the Dallas Cowboys right now. The Dallas Cowboys are trying to convince everybody that everything is A-okay. When you sign the running back, the wide receiver, and the all-pro guard, you take care of all of them financially before you ever get around to taking care of the franchise quarterback. I'm sorry, but I got questions. I got questions the Cowboys haven't been able to answer. So if you're a Cowboys fan, you better be sweating right now because this may be one of the last years you see Dak in a Cowboys uniform. Because whatever the issue is, they weren't able to get this deal done. It's got to be more than just the money. There's got to be a level where Dak Prescott looks around and says, Tyron Smith has been injured. Zach Martin's been injured. Travis Frederick has been injured. Ezekiel Elliott was holding out in camp. Amari Cooper, you had to go and acquire him and overpay the Raiders to go get him. And you haven't taken care of me. I've been here the whole time. I've been showing up. I've been practicing. I've been putting in the work. I think the Cowboys have disrespected Dak a little bit. Maybe he's making them sweat it out.